So about 6 months ago now, I put out a video titled World of Warcraft is like an arcade and Final Fantasy XIV is like a theater. And what I meant by that when it comes
I think it's kind of obvious what he meant by that. Yeah, sure. I can see what you're saying.
to World of Warcraft being an arcade is that World of Warcraft can really be broken down into just three game modes, those being Mythic Plus, Raiding, and PvP. Does World of Warcraft have open world content? Technically, yes. Right.
I don't think that's true. I think there's a lot of people that do other content in World of Warcraft, and I think that's becoming more and more true as those in-game activities become harder and harder to penetrate by the average player, right? Because now you need to have you need to have add-ons. Now you need to have different types of like raid tools and other stuff like that. You see, kind of what I'm saying here is I don't think this is true. I can see what he's saying, but I don't think it's as true as he believes it is. Yeah, collecting stuff and doing different types of like just playing the game casually is probably what most people do.
Right? Does it have pet battles and transmog? Yes.
Yeah.
But if you're paying a sub fee to play World of Warcraft and you are not engaging in Mythic Plus, PvP, or raiding in any capacity, you are paying to play a very, very small sliver of a game that has most of its focus on those three game modes.
I will definitely agree that the majority of the content that comes out is for those three game modes. And I think that's one of the problems of the game, is that there are a lot of people that are not interested in grinding fucking Raider IO. They're not interested in killing a boss on Mythic. And I also would not lump the people in who are progressing on Mythic with the people that are progressing on normal mode. I don't think that these are the same group of people, and I don't think that they're the same type of people either.
And if you investigate these three game modes, you come to really quickly find that only one of these is in any way, shape, or form designed in a way that is modern, shows any semblance of modern game design.
What does this mean?
And the reason why I say that is if you inspect, say, raiding.
Okay.
Raiding in World of Warcraft cannot be done unless you are in a party of 10 to 30 people.
Yes,
unless
true.
you're playing Mythic raiding, then you're
20.
locked to strictly 20 people. And the problem with that is when you get that many people together to cooperate, everyone is a stranger. You're usually not on Discord if you're pugging this. And you are going ahead and engaging in this content.
Can you guys cut this shit out talking about how he looks? He has cut this shit out. It makes me look like a jackass. Stop it.
You run into a problem with difficulty. If 30 people, 10 to 30 people, are getting together to do group content that is heavily dependent on each other, you're going to have to tune the fights to the lowest common denominators.
This is what happened with Cataclysm Dungeons. Cataclysm Dungeons were not as hard as people made them out to be. The only reason that they were hard is because people were using the random dungeon finder in failing groups.
Or otherwise, leave everyone frustrated, unable to clear, and then quitting the game. Now, of course, this changes if you're in a guild, right? If you find a guild to go ahead and prog normal or prog heroic, that changes things. However, the idea of guilds is in many ways outdated game design. Because raids in World of Warcraft are pretty freaking long. These take about 3 hours long. And
I think that if he wants to use the logic that guilds are outdated game design because servers are outdated game design, then I'll definitely agree with him. But I don't think that the idea of a guild is outdated game design. Final Fantasy has guilds. Every game has guilds.
And, raid night is typically something that you do for 3 hours in one sitting, maybe even twice a week.
I do think that what he's saying here is definitely true, is that the amount of time that you have to set aside to raid on a schedule in WoW is higher than most other games that are MMOs that are in the space. And because of that, I think that it makes the barrier to entry a lot higher. There's a lot of people that want to raid, but they don't want to raid on Tuesday at 7 p.m., and if they don't show up, they're kicked out of the guild. I think this is definitely true.
And for many people, that is no longer something that is feasible to be put on their schedule. It's something that is a lot more convenient to be able to come in,
exactly,
play as much as you want, for as long as you have, have that flexibility.
Well, it's like Lost Ark is a great example of this. Is that, like, let's say you're doing the new raid, the clown raid, Cockle Sadon. If you beat Gate 1, and then you have to go at Gate 2, you just leave the raid, and then you can rejoin another raid immediately at Gate 2. But I think the problem is that in WoW, there are so many artificial time dilation mechanisms that exist in raiding that make something that would naturally take in one of these other games maybe an hour, take 5 hours in WoW. Like you're talking about getting to the instance, getting buffed, summons, getting other players into the raid, rebuffing, running back to the boss, like all of these pass-fail mechanics. If one person does them wrong, everybody dies. However, many other groups and many other games have those too. WoW is different because there are more people that responsibility is assigned to. Whereas, like, you know, in WoW, you can have like up to 30 people or 20 people doing this. In Lost Ark, Cockle Sadon is only 4. And in Final Fantasy, it's only 8.
And come out, right? If you're a hardcore player, Mythic Plus is there for you. I mean, I'm sorry, Mythic Rating is there for you.
Yeah.
But if you're
Clearing
not,
trash.
raiding in World of Warcraft is not a very fun experience. And that's why...
Well, I think that, like, here's a really good way to look at raiding and why it's a problematic experience. Is that I wonder if I went through the amount of time that I spent raiding Naxxramas and how much time I actually spent raiding Nax actually doing the bosses versus clearing trash or running to the next boss or waiting to summon people. And then I took that time, and then I looked at whenever I cleared Cockle Sadon, the clown raid in Lost Ark, and then I compared what proportional amount of time am I spending in each one of these raids actually doing the boss fight. You see what I'm saying?
Recently, Blizzard for Dragonflight made it so Mythic Plus, which is the dungeons, is something that is a lot more viable for people to do without having to raid.
Exactly. That's why everybody does it.
Now, let me talk about
It's way
PvP
easier to
for
get
a little
into.
bit in World of Warcraft. PvP, the big problem with PvP in World of Warcraft is that the gear is not ever, synced when you're going ahead and doing it.
Yeah.
So you could be stronger or weaker than your competitors solely based on the gear that you have. This is something that other MMOs such as Lost Ark and Final Fantasy don't take into account. World of Warcraft still has this going on with the game for PvP.
Wait, what?
The gear, which is the dungeons, is something that is a lot more viable for people to do without having to raid. Now, let me talk about PvP for a little bit in World of Warcraft. PvP, the big problem with PvP in World of Warcraft is that the gear is not ever, synced when you're going ahead and doing it. So you could be stronger or weaker than your competitors solely based on the gear that you have.
Yeah.
This is something that other MMOs such as Lost Ark and Final Fantasy don't take into account.
That's
World
true.
of Warcraft still has this going on with the game for PvP.
That's true.
And the problem with that, of course, is that if you are someone who is a bit more casual, you get severely punished.
Yeah, I think that you should make it easier for casual players to get a full set of gear. I think the solution that Blizzard is using in Dragonflight for PvP gear is the correct decision and the correct solution, and they're making the right call. This is what I think that they should do, and I'm glad they're doing it. And I think it will not solve this problem, but it will alleviate it in a massive way. Because farming out like 40,000 honor to upgrade all of your gear is not a good time, especially whenever you have alt characters. What are they doing? So imagine in Shadowlands right now, whenever you upgrade a piece of gear in PvP, you're upgrading its PvP and its PvE item level. But what I said they should do, and what they are doing, is that they are making it to where whenever you buy a piece of gear for PvP, it comes with the highest available PvP item level right off the bat. And the upgrades only increase the PvE item level. And in my opinion, I think that's going to be a lot better because that means that people that are PvPers can get into the game a lot faster and you don't have as many gear disparities. You don't have to do anything. Like, yeah, I'm really glad they're doing this. Because I do think that there is the MMO PvP paradox. MMOs are built all around character progression, but PvP is built all around a fair competition. So how do you balance the two? I think that what they're doing now is pretty close to that, because that's kind of what we had in Mists of Pandaria and Warlords of Draenor, and it worked out pretty well.
severely punished.
They're doing it
for,
confirmed? Yes, it is
being able
confirmed.
to play in a more modern
Yes.
way, in a more flexible way, in a
PvP
way
is back
that
on the
makes more
menu.
sense with your schedule, especially since MMOs nowadays are typically played by adults. PvP isn't very feasible. In a game like Final Fantasy, you can just go in, do Crystalline Conflict as many times as you want. You don't have to.
I think another problem that is like a fucking multiplier onto this is the fact that in Final Fantasy, you're not required or expected to have multiple add-ons to help you understand what's happening in the game. Like in WoW, whenever I'm saying like, oh, I can't figure this out in the game, or like, oh, I can't tell whenever somebody has a cooldown up, people have like 8 different add-ons they want me to install. So yeah, I think that the add-on thing, there's a lot of people that don't want to download add-ons that play WoW.
Worry about your gear. You go in, you are, good or bad depending on how skilled you are, and then that's it. And so this is something that World of War, it's an old vestige of MMO design that is still hanging around till this very day. Now, if you take a look at Mythic,
I think that there is some value in getting better gear in PvP. I think so. It's just that you can't have a PvP-based MMO and have any real integrity behind the outcomes of it if gear is involved. Because it's not very fucking impressive. It's like Classic WoW. There's no integrity in the skill in Classic WoW. You just have better gear and you win, and that's all there is to it. The reality is that in like Arena, let's say, whenever you're going up against people at 2.4k rating, or really at 2.1k rating, everybody there is effectively item level synced. Because everybody's got the same gear. And maybe they haven't upgraded one piece or something like that. But overall, everybody effectively has a stat template because they're all using the same exact gear, which is important to keep in mind. Give me a second. I need to get a drink. Crack open a cold one, brother. Yep.
Plus. Mythic Plus is the only one that has some semblance of modernity to it, because you can go in with only 4 other people. It's not very difficult to get 4 people together, on a whim, and very quickly get to the entrance of a dungeon. It takes 20 to 40 minutes tops. It's fast-paced. It's fun. It pushes you to your limits. You can play it hard. You can play it easy. You can play it medium because it has scaling difficulty. And you can get engaged for,
Yeah, I think that Mythic Plus does offer an experience that most other MMOs don't really offer.
20 to 40 minutes. If you want to go again, you go again. If you don't, you're done. That's it. It's more akin to a game like Overwatch 2, which is vastly more popular than World of Warcraft in today's day and age because of all these conveniences that we have. And in many ways, they're required in today's gaming market because there are so many options. And there are so many things that you can go ahead and play. And so if a game doesn't go ahead and incorporate these features with, the busy lives and alternatives that people have to deal with, it's going to be hard for you to really keep up.
Okay.
So Mythic Plus is the only one that to some extent does keep up. Now, Mythic Plus does have some problems.
I think in general, I kind of agree with that. I think Mythic Plus is probably the most modernized version of the game right now. What do you guys think? Yeah, I would say so.
With its design. And the thing with Mythic Plus is Blizzard tends to, this is a pattern with Blizzard, put in the least amount of work to try to get as much sub time and, subscription renewals from their customer base as possible. The way this appears in Mythic Plus is they try to drag out the same 8 dungeons throughout the whole expansion. So for 2 years,
Yeah, that's definitely true. Like re-clearing I remember, bro, farming Harlan's loaded dice. Trictagon did this every tier of BFA. Every tier, it's back to Freehold to farm in another fucking agility trinket that works the exact fucking way just because they increased the item level cap. So yeah, it's dog shit. I'm glad that they fixed that in Season 4, and I hope they keep doing this in future seasons. I'm really glad that they're fixing this, because what he's saying is a huge problem.
their player base to play the same 8 dungeons over and over and over again, right? Sure, the difficulty changes, but all that is, you know, a little bit of a tweak on HP pools, a little bit of a tweak on how hard mechanics hit. And what that will typically do
Oh,
is result in a situation where people are having to use these super like sweaty min-max strats
Yeah.
and like these cheeses in the game to be able to clear the content, the higher
Oh, yeah.
difficulties. It is not new content that you have to solve. This content that you've already solved that you're now trying to exploit. And I don't think that's very good game design at all.
I think that if you look at a very, very high level, that's true. But whenever you're approaching a key on plus 10, that's going to be different than approaching a key on plus 20. And you'll usually use different strategies in general, assuming that you're not like massively over or under geared for either one of them. I do think that strategies do change in Mythic Plus.
Now in Dragonflight, they're changing it up a little bit.
Yes,
and
they
they're
are.
making it so they change the dungeon pool every patch. I do think that's a lot better, you know, to change it every season. And they're still trying to get away with doing less work because instead of having 8 new dungeons every single season, they're putting in 4 old dungeons and 4 new dungeons. Is this the worst idea? No, I actually think it's
I think that making 8 new dungeons every single season is unreasonable to expect. I think that's too much. I think that them making 8 new dungeons and them making more content throughout the expansion, like I would say that in BFA, I'll use that, that's the most recent expansion, besides Shadowlands, I think that we got an adequate amount of content. I think we got a lot of content out of BFA. I was satisfied with that. It was decent.
relatively good idea for Blizzard to do. But even still, one season in World of Warcraft is really freaking long. A season could be 6 months, 8 months, right?
Yes.
And so, for me personally, when I went ahead and I played Shadowlands Season 4, doing the same dungeons over and over again was
Not fun.
really, really fun for the first week, 2 weeks. Once
Well,
I
I
started
don't
getting
even
into
like it
my
then.
3rd week, my 4th week of doing the same dungeon with the mobs having like 1 extra mechanic per the whole dungeon, you know, some affixes, it's not enough variety. You know, I've all
No, I find it boring too. It's like if you look at the variety of like PoE maps, and I think also like clearing a Necrotic Wake baseline Mythic +2, let's say, is the same as clearing a Necrotic Wake +30. You're doing the same dungeon, killing the same bosses, doing the same trash mobs. You don't really feel like you're on that next level. It just everything one-shots you now. Whereas like in PoE, you go from, you know, the Guardians, and then you do Elder Guardians, then maybe you do Elder, you do Shaper, and then maybe you do the Conquerors, and then you build yourself up to do Cirrus, and then maybe Exarch, Searing Exarch, or the Eater of Worlds, or then you have those other Expedition bosses that are in the game. I've never done those, actually. And so you are moving forward and making progress throughout the game. And I think Lost Ark does this very well too, is that you work through Volton, you then do Vicus, and then after that you do the Clown. So you're making progress throughout the game.
already solved this puzzle. You've just shaken it up by the like smallest amount possible to try to maintain some semblance of it being fresh. That's the biggest issue with Mythic Plus. Now, of course, what I'm talking about when it comes to Final Fantasy competing in the title, of course, I'm talking about Final Fantasy is competing with WoW. What Final Fantasy is doing, what Square Enix is doing, is they're adding Criterion Dungeons. And these are going to be added into the game just a few days after me recording this video. Now, what Criterion Dungeons are is their Final Fantasy's answer to World of Warcraft's Mythic Plus.
And this is something that's good. I'm glad that they're adding this into the game.
Mythic Plus. Yes, it can get kind of repetitive, but if I'm subscribing to World of Warcraft, it is solely and specifically to play Mythic Plus, and I am not alone in this sentiment. A lot of ex-WoW guys who have come over to Final Fantasy will go back and you know, when they're talking about WoW, they're saying, yeah, but Mythic Plus was fun. Mythic Plus is really the last bastion for World of Warcraft in many ways.
I would not say that. I think that the raids in WoW were very popular for a lot of people, and I think also WoW's PvP. Like, if you are an enjoyer of WoW raiding, WoW Mythic Plus, or WoW PvP, I think that it is very unique. You're probably not going to get that same experience playing another game. I think maybe raiding is kind of close.
And this is something that's been missing for Final Fantasy for a long time. And I've been getting this craving myself
Yeah.
to go ahead and do Mythic Plus. You know, I've been playing Final Fantasy. I just cleared Stormcrown's Extreme. I'm now starting to prog Savage. And, you know, it's really fun. But it requires an 8-man team. And, you know, it's not as plug and play as something as Mythic Plus might be. You know, it's pretty close, but it's not exactly Mythic Plus. It's not quite there, you know. There's something about having that more intimate team of 4 to 5 players that I really do crave. And now it's here. And I was just
Yeah,
saying to
thank
one of my
God.
friends a couple days ago, I really wish World of Warcraft was a free-to-play game. I mean, it already has all of these pretty aggressive and predatory microtransactions. If it was free-to-play, I'd be able to go in, play it for 3-4 hours tops, get my Mythic Plus fix in, and then go back and play Final Fantasy. Now, I don't have to do that anymore because that itch is something that Square Enix stepped up and is trying to meet. You know, they're putting
Yeah, I think that's smart for them to do because there's a lot of people that really like Mythic Plus and WoW. And like you're right, yeah, if you like that, there's not really going to be a lot that you can get out of Final Fantasy if you're looking for something that's pretty much a one-to-one equivalent. So I'm glad that they're adding this into the game. And I think that them adding this into the game will actually make Mythic Plus for WoW better because WoW will invariably steal Final Fantasy's ideas that are good ideas, hopefully.
in these very difficult Criterion dungeons, which are very similar to Mythic Plus. There are going to be, you know, these dungeons that are something you could go do with 4 players that are going to be very difficult for you to clear, you know, and they have the normal criterions, which are equivalent to extreme difficulties, like an extreme trial.
Yeah.
And then there's also the criterion savage, which is going to be savage, right? Which is very hard. Now, the way that Final Fantasy designs their encounters is in many ways a lot better than the way that Blizzard designs their encounters. And let me tell you what I mean. Going ahead and doing an extreme trial or, you know, a savage tier in Final Fantasy XIV is, to me, a lot like playing Elden Ring, a lot like playing Dark Souls, and a lot of people have said it's a lot like playing fighting games. And what I mean by that is you go in and you get challenged, and it's
Okay.
difficult, and you bang your head against the wall. But because of the way that the fights are designed, you will start to feel a sense of progress in your skill, in your ability, as you're banging your head against the wall of this raid, you know?
How is that different than WoW, though? I feel like any game that has challenges is going to have this sense of gradual progress.
Due to the smaller rate sizes and due to the more scripted way that the encounters in Final Fantasy XIV are designed, you go in, you make a mistake, you go in the second time, the same thing happens again. Maybe you make that same mistake the second time, but now you know. You know, once we get to this part of the fight,
I feel like this is, again, an argument that you can make this exact same argument for World of Warcraft.
the boss is going to do this thing. I'm going to be ready to do it. And then you do it. And then you feel that sense of progression. You know, that's a little bit less so in WoW due to much larger raid sizes, one, and, you know, a lot more chaotic playstyle where it's a lot more about your ability to.
I would also say that this is not necessarily true with things like Elden Ring. Now, it is true in some circumstances, but not all circumstances. So, like, for example, there are sometimes that bosses in Elden Ring are very dynamic. So I'll give you an example. Melania in Elden Ring is programmed to do her first waterfowl dance somewhere around 70% health. However, then after that is a random timer that probably has a minimum duration of about 20 seconds. And what I've learned is that sometimes, and if you go back and you watch my kill of Melania, I'm kind of shitting on myself here, but let's be honest. In Phase 2, she didn't do a single waterfowl dance on me, and I killed her. So, there are very dynamic gameplay things that happen in Elden Ring as well. And if you've played a number of these other games, I think Sekiro is probably the best example, you'd know that that's also the case. And there are just some abilities that are harder to avoid than other ones.
Be super reactive in the moment.
Yeah.
So you create a situation where, like similar to Dark Souls, you go in, the boss is more or less going to do the same thing every time, but it's going to be very, very difficult for you to pull off, right?
I think that you can make that argument that the boss will do the same thing every time for Dark Souls 1, 2, and probably most of 3, minus like 5 bosses. Maybe 5, maybe less. But I think that you can't make that argument with Sekiro, and you can't make that argument with Elden Ring. Or at least you can't make as strong of an argument. Like, he's right generally, but not all the time.
So you go and you bang your head against the boss, you bang your head against the boss, you bang your head against the boss. And so they're extending the gameplay and the game time of the people, not through these scaling difficulties where you're doing the same thing over and over again. You're doing the same one thing, but it's taking you much, much longer to be able to actually complete that one thing. So when you do actually finish it, it's that huge sense of accomplishment, and it's not making it so you're repeating the same content. You're doing the one piece of content, and you're really mastering it in a way that is not, exploitative or that tries to cheese mechanics. It's just you having to get good enough to do the mechanics, and
I don't think that this is true. So an example of this not being true and being exploitative, I think, for example, like we use the, there was one in Alexander Savage 8, we had this one strategy that we had everybody stack on top of the tank and tank some sort of tank attack all at the same time with massive cooldowns because it was going to like reduce the amount of stacks that people had. I don't remember exactly how these things work together. So I think that in Final Fantasy, there are many instances of people being able to effectively exploit in order to achieve something. Now, Alexander 8 is old content. You're right about that. And so are there any instances of this in the new content? I don't really know. But I feel like in any game, you are going to have... There's always going to be a game, whenever you have different classes, there will be a game, or sorry, a class that will have an advantage that another class does not have. It just doesn't matter what it is. It will always be a little bit better or a little bit more useful. The problem is whenever it becomes too much better or too much worse.
it doesn't seem like Square Enix wants to put a whole ton of replayability into Criterion Dungeons, and that's good. Because any time you do the same thing for too long, you will eventually burn out. And Square Enix has a history of, being, and especially now, since Endwalker, because they have a lot more funding than they ever had before, they have this tendency with patch 6.0, 6.1, 6.2, and now 6.25, which is coming out in a couple of days, which is going to introduce these Criterion Dungeons. They have this tendency to, instead of trying to take the smallest amount of content and extend it as long as possible, they just pump new content. They just give you new things to do, like Island Sanctuary, like Golden Saucer, like Heaven on High, like Palace of the Dead. They just give you more things to do. Like,
I think that the amount of things that you can do in Final Fantasy XIV is artificially inflated because Final Fantasy XIV doesn't invalidate their content as quickly as WoW does. So, like, for example, in 5 years, we can use an example of the Mage Tower as something to do in WoW. The thing with Final Fantasy XIV is that they have designed the game like that from the beginning. And I think in doing so, they've created a larger, effective buffet of content that you can go in and choose to eat from, whatever you want. Whereas in WoW, it's like, this is the meal of the day. And if you don't like it, you're going to have to wait till tomorrow. So I think that's definitely an issue. I also think that there are more things that WoW brings out. But also, again, there are things that whenever WoW brings something out, it invalidates something else. So for an example, whenever Battle of Dazar lore came out in BFA, fucking Uldir was irrelevant. Nobody wanted to do Uldir. Why would you go and do Uldir? That's old raid content. So Blizzard even invalidates their own current expansion content patch to patch, which is a big problem, and I think they know that's a problem, which is why they're trying to do things like Season 4 to solve these types of things. But yes, I do think that Final Fantasy certainly has... It's not artificial. I think that really it kind of is, because what he's saying is that, like, all of this content, they're bringing out all of this content, and he used something like Palace of the Dead. I think Palace of the Dead came out in, like, wasn't it fucking, like, a Heaven's Ward? And then Stormblood brought in Heaven on High? Like, what I'm saying is that he's using these examples as, like, oh, they brought this out. The fact is that it is artificially valuable now because it was built to last, effectively. Which doesn't necessarily mean that it's not good. It just means that you can't say that it got brought out now.
The summer fair event where you had to jump up the thing and it was like Jump King, they give you more things.
Yeah, people wanted to see me do that.
And when you have more things to do, this makes it so you burn out a lot less. And when you have a situation where they're putting Criterion dungeons in the game that will probably take you a long time to clear, and then once you cleared, you might not have a ton of incentive to go ahead and clear it a second time, but instead of them focusing on making it so you feel compelled to, you know, do it over and over again just for, you know, external rewards instead of internal fun, what they're going to do instead is more likely prepare for the next Criterion, prepare for the next piece of content.
I agree with this completely. I don't like whenever Blizzard puts something in the game that's like super rare, or they have some sort of meta system to make you constantly do the same thing over and over and over again. And I'll be honest, it's kind of annoying now whenever I'm doing Lost Ark and I have to go and kill the clown, 6 times or something like that, in order to get enough of the Mayhem Horns to upgrade all my set gear. It is annoying to do that. So yeah, I can see this for sure. I think 6 times or 7 times is pretty good compared to what WoW expects you to do with some of the drop rates, though.
At the new Criterion, right? And that's a much healthier way to design their game.
Mm-hmm.
And so the one thing that I, till this very day, get an itch to subscribe to World of Warcraft again for, Mythic Plus, is a feature that Final Fantasy XIV's team seems to notice that, you know, there is a demand for. They seem
a lot
to
of people like this.
That this is something that a lot of people like World of Warcraft
Absolutely.
for. And they said, you know what? Why don't we take a try at this ourselves?
Which is smart.
Historically, every time Final Fantasy has stolen or, you know, has learned from World of Warcraft, they typically end up one-upping what the WoW team did. And that's all I had to say for this video. We'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.
Okay. All right. Good ending there. Yeah, I think that there are some cases where that happens. I don't think it's every single time, but I think that it does happen quite often where they're able to do a better job. And I think that's also something that WoW was able to do, which is the ironic thing, is that WoW usually has taken old systems from other games and they've basically implemented them into WoW in a way that makes more sense. So I think this is a good thing. Overall, I'm very happy to see other games using the same systems that WoW is using. I think that as time goes on, more and more of this will happen, and it will become a positive thing for the games. Because all of these games will learn from each other, and will take the best ideas, and you'll get better games in general. So I don't know why anybody would be like unhappy about this. I think that competition breeds excellence. I've always believed that. And I think this is just another example of it. Criterion's kind of shit right now. The only real reward is like 1 mount, but many people acting like that they can't change that due to feedback. Well, yeah, I mean, I think there's also going to be people that the reality is there are people that like infinite content. They want it to be infinite content. They want it to go as far as it possibly can. They want to be able to do this every single day. And should Square Enix listen to those people? I don't think so. I personally don't think so at all. I like the idea of having content that you do for a while and then it's done. I like being done with things. That's what I've always felt. I'll watch one more short video here, okay? I know people want me to watch the Narc video. I'm not going to watch that today, but I will probably watch it tomorrow if I have time. This is a short video by Stay Safe. Now, I think this guy's video, by the way, was pretty good. Obviously, I do feel like WoW and Final Fantasy have a little bit more similarities than what he was talking about, but I do think that it's very good that Final Fantasy is trying to compete against WoW with Mythic Plus Dungeons, because I've felt like Mythic Plus Dungeons have been very stale for a long time too. Pinned comment, 1 subscribe equals 1 hair growth. Okay. Yeah, big fucking funny.